scriptural image for life as concretized symbolically as an entity is the tree of paradise, which is the tree of Toba. That is the essence of life. Dar al-Akhir, the next abode, Allah has said, is al-Hayawan, the place of real life. That's where life, in its miraculous, lively, dancing, luminous quality, its praising quality becomes perfect in the Jannah. Jannah is a garden. Gardens are about life. The other place is about the false life, which is about the fire. Once those two things are separated, the culmination, the highest point, as it were, of the paradise is the tree of Toba. So this is where Mevlana goes next. Tazagi vujun beshe Toba yistin, hamcho jun beshhaya khalqan nistin. The freshness and the swaying of the Toba tree is thus. Tazagi vujun besh. That's what life is. He's, as a brilliant poet, explaining, giving us language of life is not a kind of static thing. Life is about movement. There are some rather uninteresting lower plants and lichens that don't move about too much, but when we think of life, we think about movement. Lively means to move. So this is why he's using this language, Toba tree, as moving and being fresh. The swaying of the living creatures are not thus. Why is that? Because we're still in this world where a kind of fiery death is mingled with the real life that is within us, and we're in this moribund, morgane state, kind of sleepy, not really grabbing the moment as Mevlana would want us to. But in the Akhirah, in the next world, there is the reality of the death that comes about from following the fiery ego. That's where you go if that's how you are. And similarly, in the divine justice, if you have worked for that which is light, beautiful, green, verdant, paradisal, for the higher possibilities within yourself, for that sakina that comes when you've overcome the fiery, then you get to see the greatest biological entity, which is the Toba tree, which is Quranic and referred to recurrently in the Quran, and also the shade of the tree, وَظِلٍ مَمْدُودٍ, the stretched shade, where the Quran speaks of that, it's alluding to this tree. الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا وَعَمِلُوا الصَّالِحَاتِ طُوبَى لَهُمْ وَحُسْنُ مَآبٍ. Those who believe and do right, pure, just things, Toba is theirs, and an excellent place of return. We use this language of ma'ab and ma'ad a lot, don't we, when we speak of eschatology? And again, this helps if we're looking at creation as a kind of circle almost, although it doesn't go around again. Still, there's this kind of cyclical majesty about the way in which it's all been created. The two breaths at the beginning, the two blasts at the end, rahmah at the beginning, rahmah at the end, and a tree at the beginning and a tree at the end. And there's a lot of trees in Mevlana, and he does a lot with them. There's a lot of trees in the Quran. There's the olive tree, there's the palm tree, there's the tree of Toba. And this amazing verse, أَلَمْ تَرَ كَيْفَ ضَرَبَ اللَّهُ مَثَلًا كَلِمَةً طَيِّبَةٍ أَصْلُهَا ثَابِتٌ وَفَرْعُهَا فِي السَّمَاءِ تُؤْتِي أُكُلَهَا كُلَّ حِينٍ بِإِذْنِ رَبِّهَا وَيَضْرِبُ اللَّهُ الْأَمْثَالَ لِلنَّاسِ لَعَلَّهُمْ يَتَذَكَّرُونَ. Suddenly this verse comes. Have you not seen how Allah strikes a likeness and a similitude? And it's true, we do not say that the realities described in Scripture, particularly the afterlife things, are just metaphors. The Mu'tazilites thought that. They are realities, but Allah is still using this language of mathal. وَأُتُوا بِهِ مُتَشَابِهًا. The fruits, again, you need trees for fruits, they are given them in likeness. An apple of this world is not a replica of the apple that will be in the next world. It's a kind of indication, an imperfect sign of the perfect archetypal form of that in the next world. So tree, the Toba tree, and there's some kind of connection between shajaratin tayyiba, a pure tree, and a pure word. So where does that take us? That takes us back to the initial principle of those two first things being creation and word. And the word preceding creation, again, the mind boggles when you think about how something can precede time itself, but this is what we mean by qidam. At the end, there is also this tree. And Mevlana does a lot with this. And we can only look very, very briefly at it. The idea of a tree as being kind of cosmological is universal and ancient. The old Norse legends had the Yggdrasil, which is the cosmic tree. The Aztecs had a cosmic tree. The Tibetan Buddhists to this day have the world willow. It seems to be something universal, that there is something in creation which can be analogized to a tree. And when you think about it, it's actually a perfect image because it's about a kind of mirroring. What is a tree? Well, a tree is a kind of mirror, isn't it? Because it has an unseen dimension, the roots that go down into earth. And it also has branches that mirror that by going up into Asuman, into heaven. It's symmetrical. And the trunk itself is a kind of axis. And it's the trunk that connects the two. So if you want a perfect metaphor or an image for that which is earthly and paradisal at the same time, which is also, of course, going to be your perfect image for uncreated divine speech that people can still understand and live by, then the tree is your perfect image. And that's why Mevlana is talking about it here. This is the principle of life that is uniting dunya and akhirah, the place that gives shade and the place that bears fruits. So the Quranic ayah again says, it gives its fruits at every time with the permission of its Lord. And that's one reason why it's a metaphor for scripture. It's a metaphor also for the human heart, for the human soul. And it also indicates, because another thing trees do is that they kind of grow. So this takes us away from our model of creation as a kind of static thing, just being there like an asteroid and it doesn't change ever. Instead, it's a living, breathing entity and has a kind of teleology that leads on to the bearing of fruits. And the fruits in Rumi's system, the paradisal fruits, are just the nourishing moments of the experience of the divine proximity, the divine love and the divine closeness. Now, one of the things that the Mevlevis will say about their best known, certainly not the only, but their best known ritual is that it has two things that are to do with vegetation. The famous Mevlevi instrument is the nai, the reed flute, which is made from something, it's not a tree, but it's something that is analogous to it. It's about life, it's a living thing. And also the turning, the devran, represents the human being as Khalifa, is the perfect human being between the two, because he's receiving rahmah from heaven with his right hand, dispensing it with his left hand on earth. So this is his basic movement. And the going around indicates his participation in the movements of the aflaq, the spheres, which we're all doing anyway, because our prayers, Ramadan, everything is connected to the movements of the spheres. We're all part of that cosmic dance. But the Mevlevi is kind of symbolically enacting that. And he is tree-like, living, and one part of him is in heaven, the other part of him is on earth. But the tree receives from above. It's the water that nourishes it. And the tree then gives, as it were, to us from above, which is the fruits. So it's a one-way process, which is what prophecy itself is, what the saint is. The saint doesn't take anything. The Holy Prophet ﷺ didn't take anything. It just gives. Why? Because this hand, which is above, is the hand that takes from the infinite, from the world of placelessness, from La Mekan. So this image of the tree is important, and it's no coincidence that it's at the center of our art in Islam. Vegetal motifs, arabesques, tessellations, there's kind of growths everywhere, from the time that they designed the Dome of the Rock and the Umayyad Mosque in Damascus to the great mosques of Istanbul. Carpets tend to have trees. Prayer carpets, often there'll be a tree there, because the tree, it's the paradisal symbol of the fact that there can be a connection between heaven and earth, which provides fruit and which provides shade, and the worshipper is the one who wishes to be in the shade of Allah's rahmah. That's what the salat is asking for. Let me venture upon just one more briefly. There is 11, 12, 15 verses altogether. So I should move a little bit faster. Gardar uftad dar zamin u asman, Zahra hashan ab gardad dar zaman. Should it fall on earth or sky, their livers will turn to water at once. What's falling? Well, it's talking again about the nafha, about the breath. And here he's talking about the flip side of this effulgence. On the one hand, it produces the tree, and it produces the fruit of the tree, and it links heaven and earth, and it makes us turn, and it brings everything to life. But on the other hand, it puts out the fire and seems to put us out, because we think that we are our personalities, our individuality. What am I other than my personality, my memory, my individualism? Take that away and what could possibly be left? So it's frightening. The advent of al-haq is beautiful but also fearsome. And again, human art has always known this, and the apprehension of nature and of beauty has always been alert to the fact that human beings, when confronted by beauty, do not just have a loving for it and a longing for it and a sense of ease, but there's also a fear. This is the mysterium tremendum et fascinans. It's fascinating and entrancing, but it's also terrifying. So to see any of the signs of Allah's creation, unless it's something that is kind of a small thing that is not, because of the nature of the relationality, threatening, like a baby rabbit or something, it's not frightening as such. But generally, the mazahir kawniyya, Allah's manifestations in creation, are magnificent but scary as well. And in fact, the bulk of them are scary. If you look through the Hubble Space Telescope, most of the stuff that's out there is pretty overwhelming, dwarfing us, and we don't want to get anywhere near those X-ray stars and those supernovas and those colliding galaxies and those extremes of temperature. There is a fear. A knowledge of Allah's manifestation in the world alienates us and makes us afraid. And also, if you go down into the micro world and you look through an electron microscope or look at some of the conclusions of the Large Hadron Collider, some of those other things, that's pretty scary stuff as well. What we're actually made up of is sort of supercharged particles moving sometimes randomly at gigantic speeds. There's a way in which our humanness is alienated by our awareness of how we are totally part of creation. And what Mevlana is doing here is to say their livers will turn to water at once. If you really see the nature and the majesty of Allah's creation, you will be afraid. The liver is the seat of courage in traditional medicine, so you become witless with fear. And it applies to the second of the two breaths as well. And this is where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is speaking of his book, and he says, لَوْ أَنزَلْنَا هَذَا الْقُرْآنَ عَلَى جَبَلٍ لَرَأَيْتَهُ خَاشِعًا مُتَصَدِّعًا مِنْ خَشْيَةِ اللَّهِ. If we sent this Qur'an down upon a mountain, you would see it terrified and split apart from the fear of Allah. It's just a book. But there is a majesty in the book which is not just about the outward form of the meanings, but is about its ontological power and weight. And one of the deepest things we do in Ramadan, of course, is to bathe in the word. And one reason why Tarawih is such an extraordinary, humbling, strengthening thing, once you have a humble relationship to Allah's book, is that it gives you some sense of this jalal, this mysterium tremendum. It's not a particularly consoling thing, it's a rigorous thing, and it makes you feel small, and that's exactly how we should feel, because that's how we are.